Hi, it's me again, Millennium. Today we are going to talk about the timeline and the graph editor in After Effects 7. Over the past years this has probably been one of the most requested features, and now finally the nice people at Adobe have given in to our wishes and implemented it. I have created a project with a few layers and some motion, and I'm scrubbing it to illustrate what's going on. Let's take a look at some details. First off, I'm going to show you some functions that are already in After Effects 6.5, but some of you might not know them. In the bottom left corner you can find a few buttons for revealing and hiding certain columns. This equates to the button you can find in After Effects 6.5 that will switch between blend modes and AV functions. You can also reveal the in and out points of your layers and their duration. In order to customize the interface, you can also hide and reveal columns individually. You can do so by using the right mouse button menu. Lastly, you can also rearrange those columns. Now that we are done with that, let's move on and take a look at what's actually going on. I'm going to select all layers and reveal their animated properties. This can be easily done by using Ctrl A for select all and then hitting the U key. As you can see, I've created quite a bit of action for just a 10-second animation. Most of the keys are however linear, and we are going to change that later on. To make it easier for you to follow, let me close up a few layers. I only have used effects to achieve things that cannot be done otherwise. So we have an instance of the circle effect on our evil eye layer and the shatter effect on our target. If you remember, at one point our target gets crumpled. I'm just selecting the 4 circles again to show you their motion path. If you look closely at our evil eye layer, you can see that I've animated the color of the circle effect. It's repeated using an expression. This is also reflected by a preview gradient in the timeline. When I now turn on and off the Show Post Expression Result button, it will adjust accordingly. This functionality is also available in After Effects 6.5, but there it is less noticeable because it is obscured by the graph which is displayed directly in the timeline. Okay, we've talked enough about the normal timeline. Let's switch over to the graph editor view. Since we didn't have anything selected, our graph is empty. We are going to change that by revealing a few animated properties and selecting their function graphs. Depending on what property you select, the graphs will look different. Properties such as color, which are made up of multiple components, will show 3 or more curves. With the default setting, the graph editor will always show you the speed graphs. As you can imagine, this is not always practical. Especially when working with position data, this can become very confusing. Therefore, I most of the time turn off the Auto Select Graph Type option. However, if you select other graphs which only have one parameter, it doesn't really matter much. To illustrate this, I've turned off the Auto Select option, and when I now select a position parameter, my curves will appear properly. It is now much easier to edit them. As you may have noticed, I'm using a right mouse button menu to easily gain access to all options. Whenever your mouse moves over a curve, After Effects will show you additional info for that curve. This can be a value or simply a hint that shows you what type of curve you are currently working on. So far we have only worked with single parameters. But what happens if we want to work with multiple parameters at once? That is what graph editor sets are for. You can see that suddenly many curves have appeared on the screen. These are our position parameters of the lower three circles. I can add them to the graph editor set by clicking on the icon next to the stopwatch. Disabling the icon will remove them from the graph editor set. When you work with the graph editor set, After Effects will assign different colors to the curves. Position curves, however, will maintain equal colors throughout, no matter to which layer they belong. Unfortunately, you cannot select which color is assigned to which parameter. This is a minor inconvenience, but should be fixed in one of the next releases of After Effects, I hope. In order to work with your curves, you are provided with a set of tools, which you can find in a series of buttons at the lower edge of the graph editor. The two leftmost buttons contain the menu entries you can also find in the right-click menu. The next two buttons enable snapping and allow you to use bounding box transformation. In addition to panning around and zooming with your scroll wheel, these three buttons allow you to auto-fit your graphs to your window. Enough talking, let's get practical. I'm selecting a few keys, and as you can see, they are encompassed by a bounding box. By moving the edges of the bounding box, I can move the keys. The amount of scaling is affected by the position of the center, and when I move that around, you can see lines being drawn. This is the snapping. Of course, this also works with single keys. By the way, we are still working with linear keys, and if you wanted to change those, all you would need is to click on one of the buttons in the lower right corner of the graph editor. Those are your interpolation types, which are also accessible via the right mouse menu, and the keyframe assistance for easing. Working with the curves hasn't changed that much, it's just gotten a bit more comfortable. Keep in mind that spatial and temporal interpolation are still separate in After Effects. So make sure you are always working on the right curve and don't confuse them. A simple example of how the new graph editor can advance your workflow is our green dot. It acts as the target for our evil eyes. The eyes themselves are driven by an expression. They will always follow the green dot. In the past, when I wanted to keep track of both layers at the same time, I had to unroll them both and show their function graphs. This was very uncomfortable and slow. Now all I need to do is add them to the graph editor set. I have done that for our target and both eyes. When I switch over to graph view, I can see the resulting curves for our target and one of the eyes. I will now turn on show post expression results for the other eye as well. When I push around my target interactively, the resulting curve for the eye will update accordingly. You can also see how the newly created keys affect my existing curves. This was not possible in After Effects 6.5 and makes your life much easier.